Let's bring in our chief political analyst, Gloria Borger, right now. The president also had a specific warning for members of Congress, the Republicans, on the issue of raising the debt ceiling. Listen to this.
If Congress in any way suggests that they're going to tie negotiations to debt ceiling votes and take us to the brink of default once again as part of a budget negotiation, which, by the way, we have never done in our history until we did it last year, I will not play that game, because we've got to break that habit before it starts.
All right, easy to say, I will not play that game, but if the Republican majority in the House says they're not voting to raise the debt ceiling, he says, I won't play that game. What's he going to do?
Well, the president has a lot of leverage here, Wolf. I mean, look, he just won this election. It's not like the debt ceiling debacle in 2011 went over well with the American public. The American public was disgusted by it. It was brinksmanship that people did not like to see. In a recession, they thought it endangered the economy. Republicans also know that if you look at the polls, and they look at the polls, that the public would blame them if we go over the fiscal cliff by a 2-to-1 margin. So I would say that right now, and I think even Republicans would stipulate this, Wolf, the president has the leverage here. I mean, Republicans also know that that if they were to go over the cliff, that the tax cuts on the wealthy would increase. You could come back and undo the tax cuts on the middle class expiring. But the president, you know, the president's in a pretty good bargaining position here, which is why you see him sort of hold firm.
What leverage do the Republicans have?
Look, I think they understand that for some liberals, going over the cliff is okay, because liberals will say, oh, you know what, we get those defense cuts we wouldn't get otherwise, and they believe that the public would not like to see that. And I think at some point, Wolf, you have to say, I don't know when it is, but at some point the president and his people, as Dana Bash was just talking about, need to get to the negotiating table. Let's be fair to the House Speaker. He put a plan on the table that included revenues, substantial revenues, not raising the rates. I mean, that's the big problem. But he did do that. Lots of outside conservative groups are now railing against him. But he did put something on the table that was a serious plan, and the White House is not dealing with him on it. So the president has leverage, but at a certain point, they all have to behave like grown-ups.
The former House Speaker, Newt Gingrich, knows something about going eyeball to eyeball with the Democratic president. That happened back in the 90s with Bill Clinton. Listen to what he says about the fiscal cliff.
I think that no deal is better than a bad deal. I think going off this cliff is less dangerous than letting things build up for a year or 2 years to have an even bigger cliff. I think that the president clearly has staked out a position of non-seriousness, and I think that it's very difficult for the House Republicans right now to find any practical way to get his attention.
So he's saying go over the cliff rather than accept what the president wants right now.
I don't need to remind you that this is the House Speaker who shut down the government. Right. And that didn't work so well for the Republicans. So going over the cliff is something I don't think they want to do. As I was saying earlier, some liberals may want to do it. As I keep saying, Wolf, what's the irony to me here is that the larger issues are things they really understand how to resolve if you look at all their proposals. They just can't get there because they can't agree on this revenue issue. Where does the revenue come from? Do you raise the rates on the wealthy? If you do, how much? And that's actually, in the whole realm of things, a sticking point that one would presume if they actually got in a room, they could get over. And don't forget, Wolf, these people invented the fiscal cliff. They invented it, brought us to the fiscal cliff because they knew when they were up against it that they might be forced to act. The thought now that they would actually push the cliff off again is ridiculous.